Fellow Americans.
You might be wondering, why in the world is there a 30-minute countdown before the show starts? Well, we actually start live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern time, so this whole 30-minute countdown is a chance for YouTube and Rumble to send out their alerts and notifications, so we encourage you to gather up and hang out with everyone in the chat room. So every day at 4 p.m. Eastern time is when we do this show live. You can join us for the countdown if you like, or just set your clock and reminder that at 4 p.m. Eastern is when we go live. You can also make sure you subscribe and turn on that bell notification, so hopefully you will get a notification.
What do you have to say about dictators of countries like Indonesia, who we sell weapons to, yet they are slaughtering people in East Timor? What do you have to say about Israel, who is slaughtering Palestinians, who impose martial law? What do you have to say about that? Those are our allies. Why do we sell weapons to these countries? Why do we support them? Why do we bomb Iraq when it commits similar problems?
There are various examples of things that are not right in this world, and the United States is trying. I really am surprised that people feel that it is necessary to defend the rights of Saddam Hussein, when what we ought to be thinking about is how to make sure that he does not use weapons of mass destruction.
I'd like to...
Who are shouting? Just a moment.
I'm not defending them in the least. What I am saying is that there needs to be consistent application of U.S. foreign policy. We cannot support people who are committing the same violations because they are political allies. That is not acceptable. We cannot violate UN resolutions when it is convenient to us. You're not answering my question, Madam Albright.
You briefed the press, did you not, when you were there?
Well, I had several jobs. One of my jobs was that of analyst. I also was an interrogator and indeed briefed the press when we, the CIA, wanted to circulate disinformation on a particular issue. Disinformation is not necessarily a lie. It may be a half-truth. And we would pick out a journalist. I would go do the briefing and hope that he would put the information in print.
What was your percentage of success?
We were pretty successful in planning information of a rather rarefied nature. For instance, if we wanted to get across to the American public that the North Vietnamese were building up their force structure in South Vietnam, I would go to a journalist and advise him that in the past 6 months, X number of North Vietnamese forces had come down the Ho Chi Minh Trail system through southern Laos. Now, there is no way a journalist can check that information. That's data derived from radio intercepts, spy in the sky photography. So either he goes with the information or he doesn't, and ordinarily or usually the journalist would go with it because it looked like some kind of exclusive. Go after these gentlemen. I would be directed to cultivate them, to spend time with them at the Caravel Hotel or the Continental Hotel, to socialize with them, and slowly but surely to try to gain their confidence by dolloping out valid information which was true. And then I would drop into a conversation the data that we wanted to get across, which might not be true. One piece of data, for instance, that we managed to plant in the New Yorker magazine had to do with a supposed North Vietnamese effort in 1973 to develop airfields along the border of South Vietnam. The reason we wanted to plant this information was that we were trying to persuade the U.S. Congress that Saigon should continue to get a great deal of aid, and that the North Vietnamese were the chief violators of the ceasefire accord. That was printed in the New Yorker magazine under the byline of Robert Chaplin, as indeed was a great deal of such information which we tried to circulate.
Frank, a two-part question. What were the objectives of what was the objective of the CIA? What about the moral implications of what you were doing in feeding this information? Did the objective override the moral implications, moral problems?
Well, the objective of the agency in general is to generate intelligence and get it back to Washington, to get at the truth and make sure the policymakers understand it. When you plant disinformation, you are diverging from that objective, and I think probably in retrospect it was very counterproductive. I am, as an ex-CIA agent, opposed to the disinformation activities in which I was involved. I admit that I was involved, and I think it served no useful purpose. Propagandizing the American public or Congress is not the CIA's job. As to the morality of what the CIA was doing or that particular activity, the war was a very relative thing. It was a relativist environment, and morality seldom came into play when you were operating in the field. In my estimation, a CIA man should be amoral. That may sound pretty shocking to somebody, but what if my morality were that of a Nazi agent, if you will? You wouldn't want me to be your intelligence officer. Keep the morals out of intelligence. Keep the truth in, and stay away from disinformation.
It would have been more appropriate for Mr. Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, to address this House according to Article 144, an article which was specifically designed to debate violations of human rights, democracy, and the rule of law, which is clearly the case with Mr. Trudeau. Then again, a Prime Minister who openly admires the Chinese basic dictatorship, who tramples on fundamental rights by persecuting and criminalizing his own citizens as terrorists just because they dared to stand up to his perverted concept of democracy, should not be allowed to speak in this House at all. Mr. Trudeau, you are a disgrace for any democracy. Please spare us your presence. Thank you.
radical colleagues, but the answer to war is not more war, it's peace. And peace isn't delivered by the barrel of a gun, it's delivered by diplomacy, by dialogue. You can wish away your continent's history, but we share a continent with Russia. We will sit down with Russia. There will be a negotiated peace, and this organisation should be promoting it earlier rather than delaying it and making sure that more Ukrainians die. Your feigning of sympathy rings hollow. It makes me sick, to be honest with you.
We become involved when disinformation poses a threat to the security of our country. It is when there's a connectivity to a threat to our country. It could be a threat, a connectivity to violence. And what this working group does, is precisely what I would think you would want it to do, which is to take a look at the work, the disinformation work that our department has done and ask the following questions. Do we have policies? Do we have guardrails? Do we have standards?
But here's the problem.
Ensure,
We can't even agree. We can't even agree what disinformation is. You can't even agree that it was disinformation, that the Russians fed information to the Steele dossiers. You can't agree to that. How are we ever going to come to an agreement on what is disinformation so you can police it on social media?
Senator, I have 2 points, if I may finish. Number one, that what this working group does, because it's not an office, what this working group does is ensure that there are guardrails, definitions, standards to make sure that the free speech rights, the civil rights, civil liberties, and privacy rights of individuals.
So do you think COVID disinformation threatens our national security?
And number two, if I may, Senator, and number two, is it your proposition that when the cartels spread disinformation with respect to our immigration policies to try to lure vulnerable migrants to our border illegally?
I think you've got no idea what disinformation is, and I don't think the government's capable of it. Do you know who the greatest propagator of disinformation in the history of the world is? The U.S. government. Are you familiar with McNamara, the Pentagon Papers? Are you familiar with George W. Bush and the weapons of mass destruction? Are you familiar with Iran-Contra? I mean, think of all the debates and disputes we've had over the last 50 years in our country. We work them out by debating them. We don't work them out by the government being the arbiter. I don't want you guardrails. I want you to have nothing to do with speech. You think we can't determine, speech by traffickers is disinformation? You think the American people are so stupid they need you to tell them what the truth is? You can't even admit what the truth is with the Steele dossier. I don't trust government to figure out what the truth is. Government is largely disseminating disinformation.
Hey everyone, just as a reminder, our show starts at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, just a few minutes from now, but I should remind you that we have a daily newsletter. It's totally free. Natalie and I work very hard on it every morning over our cup of coffee, putting the stories together that we think are important that the mainstream media is going to ignore. All you need to do is go to our website. It's just redacted.inc. Put in your email address. We won't ever sell your email to anybody. And then you'll receive a welcome email. And all you need to do is verify that email, and 7 a.m. Eastern Time is when we send out our daily newsletter. And it's about 5 or 10 minutes in length that you can read it over your cup of coffee. And like I said, we cover 4 or 5 of the big stories of the day, plus a couple of things you might have missed while you were sleeping. We try to have some fun with it, add a little humor into it. And again, it's a great way to start off your morning. But it's also a great way for us to stay connected with you as well, because We've been banned and blocked on some of these platforms before, where we haven't been allowed to post anything, not even a community post. So the only way for us to stay connected with you is through our newsletter. We were able to send out a newsletter and say, hey everyone, we're blocked for the next week, and let you know what was actually going on with our show. Anyway, go to redacted.inc and sign up for the free newsletter, and it'll be posted first thing in the morning over your cup of coffee.
This is a bit of an aside, but in terms of how you think about problem sets, when I was a cadet, what's the cadet motto at West Point? You will not lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate those who do. I was the CI director. We lied, we cheated, we stole. It was like we had entire training courses.
We had a good discussion on ensuring global energy security and adequate oil supplies to support global economic growth, and that will begin shortly. I'm doing all I can to increase the supply for the United States of America, which I expect to happen. The Saudis share that urgency, and based on our discussions today, I expect we'll see further steps in the coming weeks.
Are you worried about
One of the hopeful things that I've discovered is that nearly every war that has started in the past 50 years has been a result of media lies. The media could have stopped it if they had searched deep enough. If they hadn't reprinted government propaganda, they could have stopped it. But what does that mean? Well, that means basically populations don't like wars. And populations have to be fooled into wars. Populations don't willingly and with open eyes go into a war. So if we have a good media environment, then we'll also have a peaceful environment.
Killed a million people in Iraq.
That is a separate...
You killed a million people in Iraq. It's incredible that you have the brass neck to be sitting here now urging another Iraq war.
George,
after
if
what
I
you've
was
already
still in
done.
Parliament, I...
There can be no doubt that Saddam Hussein has biological weapons and the capability to rapidly produce more, many more. And he has the ability to dispense these lethal poisons and diseases in ways that can cause massive death and destruction. If biological weapons seem too terrible to contemplate, chemical weapons are equally chilling. UNMOVIC already laid out much of this, and it is documented for all of us to read in UNSCOM's 1999 report on the subject. If we consider just one category of missing weaponry, 6,500 bombs from the Iran-Iraq war, UNMOVIC says the amount of chemical agent in them would be in the order of 1,000 tons. These quantities of chemical weapons are now unaccounted for. Dr. Blick says, quipped that, quote, mustard gas is not marmalade. You are supposed to know what you did with it. We believe Saddam Hussein knows what he did with it, and he has not come clean to the international community. We have evidence these weapons existed. What we don't have is evidence from Iraq that they have been destroyed or where they are. That is what we are still waiting for.
Okay, inspection worth doing, everybody's agreed it's worth doing, and it gets stopped.
Yes, sir.
At that moment, we're an automatic pilot as far as you're concerned. Period. No ifs, ands, or buts. Now, I respect that. But now, it seems to me the Secretary of State might have a slightly different problem. Secretary of State might be sitting there and saying, now look over there on that side. Now, I remember so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so, and the 12 people on this side, they're all the ones that said they didn't want to use force. Now, I'm going to have to go tell the president now that we should, or Secretary Cohen, unleash whatever it takes to get it done. And our military assessment is the same as the majors. The majors' assessment is, privately held but publicly acknowledged later, that airstrikes alone aren't going to do this. Saddam's not going to cave on this. So, now here's the deal. I recommended the president have at it and let the chips fall where they may. A reasonable position for the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State to take. But I respectfully suggest, Major, I respectfully suggest they have a responsibility slightly above your pay grade. Slightly above your pay grade. To decide whether or not to take the nation to war alone. Or to take the nation to war partway. Or to take the nation to war halfway. That's a real tough decision. That's why they get paid the big bucks. That's why they get the limos and you don't. I mean this sincerely. I'm not trying to be flip. Because I think, and that's what I said at the outset, the reason why I'm glad you did what you did, we should come to our milk. We should make a decision. But in terms of whether the Secretary of State has no more to consider than you do as the arms inspector. You didn't get in, didn't get my job done, get me in. Period. You made the deal, right? That's the deal. A deal's a deal. Get me in. Scott Ritter, I'm ready to go. It's not how it works. Now, maybe it should work that way. But wouldn't you acknowledge that if you were President of the United States or the Secretary of State, you'd sit there and say, now, okay, old Scotty boy didn't get in. We said he should get in. We want him to get in. It's important that he does get in. They're not going to let him in, so what are we going to do now? We know that France and Russia aren't going to be with us. We're quite confident China's not. We've already run those traps. They're not there. We're not sure where the United States Senate is, but have at it, boys. Go get them. And by the way, Scott and the boys say air power's not enough. I think it's a legitimate debate, Scott, Major. I think it's a legitimate debate. But I don't think we should be putting it in the context of you have somebody up there at state saying, look, how can we weasel out of this agreement? We want to let this guy out there hanging. We're not this. It's a very practical political decision. Same kind of decision General Powell made. Same kind of decision President Bush made. Every president, every Secretary of State has to do it. Like I said, they get paid more than you. Their job's a hell of a lot more complicated than yours. They may have made the wrong decision, and you brought it to light. We should address it. We should say straight up where we are, and we should do it. And for that, I thank you. But it's above your pay grade.
about 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon, and one of the generals called me and he said, "Sir, you got to come in and talk to me a sec." He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." I said, "We're going to war with Iraq? Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper. He said, "I just got this down from upstairs," meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran."
Hey everyone, Clayton here. The show is going to start at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. I should remind you that we have a VIP community. It's our Redacted Rebel VIP community. Now, this show is totally free, what you're watching right now, right? You can subscribe here on YouTube and Rumble, totally free. But if you'd like to support independent journalism, we are run by you. Without you guys, we wouldn't be able to do this show. We wouldn't be able to hire the team that we have. We wouldn't be able to afford the servers that we have. We wouldn't be able to afford the reporters that we have, the team that we have. So you can support us by going to redacted.inc, and on the right side of your screen, you'll see a VIP community button. Just click that, and for the price of a cup of coffee once a month, you can support us. We put out exclusive content, early interviews that no one else will see, live streams just for our VIP Rebel community. So again, it's totally free to watch this show. But if you do want to support independent journalism, we would really appreciate it. Come on over to redacted.inc, click on that community button, and decide if you want to sign up or not. It's totally up to you. We thank you. And meanwhile, the show will start in just a few moments at 4 p.m. Eastern Time.
Whatever our hopes may be for the future, for reducing this threat or living with it, there is no escaping either the gravity or the totality of its challenge to our survival and to our security. A challenge that confronts us in unaccustomed ways in every sphere of human activity. This deadly challenge imposes upon our society 2 requirements of direct concern, both to the press and to the President. 2 requirements that may seem almost contradictory in tone, but which must be reconciled and fulfilled if we are to meet this national peril. I refer first to the need for far greater public information, and second, to the need for far greater official secrecy. The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
Welcome, everyone, to Redacted. I'm Clayton Morris.
I'm Natali Morris.
And welcome to the show where we try to connect the dots in this crazy clown world and cover the stories the mainstream media is largely ignoring. The mainstream media will have you believe, of course, that, well, the government shutdown is all about you and it's going to really hurt you personally. And that's what the liberal press wants you to believe right now. But, of course, the leverage from Republicans right now is the only thing they have. Can they stop this Ukraine war funding? Can they stop the funding of the invasion at the southern border? We are going to look at that on today's show.
Plus, we're going to take a look at what is happening in Gaza from someone who is there on the ground. We're very excited to welcome Vanessa Beeley. We're also going to talk about new revelations about Alexei Navalny's death. Did Ukraine do it? This is something that was insinuated last week by Gilbert Doctorow. Now we have a little bit more of a data point on that. That's interesting, right?
That's right. We're also going to look at the Canadian trucker convoy suing the Trudeau administration. Finally, we've been waiting for this. We've been waiting and waiting and waiting. Will the Trudeau administration finally have its comeuppance for what they did to those individuals? And all of this comes at the same moment when they are pushing their online harms bill right now, which is going to clamp down further on censorship in Canada. All of that and more as Redacted starts right now. Welcome in, everyone. Hope you guys are doing well on this Tuesday night. Jay Savage in our chats has become a member for 8 months here. Thank you. Says, please remember Aaron Bushnell. Yes. It says Free Palestine there. So, Jay, thank you for your comment there and your super chat. We appreciate it. I should mention last night our show was blocked, and many of you wrote to us and said, hey, what happened to your show last night? Yes, we were blocked and censored because of our coverage. That happens from time to time. There are certain things that YouTube, Google is not a fan of. You know, they don't like certain topics that go against their narrative. We're always live on Rumble. If you ever miss a show and you're like, wow, YouTube's blocking me, I can't watch it, I can't find the show, what's going on? Remember, we are always live simultaneously on Rumble, which is a free speech platform. So please, make sure you're subscribed over there. We're almost at 500,000 subscribers on Rumble. So you never have to worry about that censorship.
That's very exciting.
You know what we could do?
Yeah. What's that?
Maybe if we just replaced all of our B-roll with black people instead of, like all of it, like Google wants, then maybe we'd be okay.
That's an idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could do that, even though most of the warmongers in our introduction are all white guys.
Right.
So, yeah, maybe. There's no equal representation or DEI in warmongers. They're mostly white men.
Yeah, they're all, and white women. Yeah, they're all.
And women.
Victoria Nuland and Hillary Clinton and all of those, and Madeleine Albright and all of that. So good to see all of you guys here. And
Nikki Haley. She represents.
She does represent.
Yeah.
Nimrata. In the chat, some people were saying, "Hey, does YouTube also censor comments if you're watching us live on YouTube?" Yeah, they absolutely do. There's certain things that they don't like, so we won't even see them. Like, you might type something in, and if they don't like it, it won't show up here. So, but of course, it's a platform that still reaches millions of people, so we use it, and we.
Well, we see your comments right now, but every now and again we see something that's held for review. That's not us. And if there are certain topics that we get shadow banned for, chances are you probably are as well. So you have to learn to do the dance that we do every day on this platform, because we absolutely do want to see your comments on whatever platform they are in.
Well, let's get to some news now. We are days away from a government shutdown in the United States, and this is frankly the only leverage that Republicans have right now. I mean, this is all about one thing as leverage. Stop spending money in Ukraine. And stop funding the southern border invasion, which is being funneled and funded by you, the taxpayers. The United States government, as we've shown you repeatedly here on this show, is funding and supporting the invasion of our southern border, and it's being done by the Biden administration with the direction of the Department of Homeland Security. That's exactly what's happening. So what happens if they run out of money? Oh, well, I don't know. We're about to find out. This is all about to come to a head, though, in the next few days, because Biden held an emergency meeting today, this afternoon, calling Schumer and Mike Johnson, called the party leaders to the White House, begging them to get on the same page, trying to get them to push something forward so we don't have a government shutdown this week. He's running for president, after all. It's not a good look right now, as we're seeing high inflation numbers once again. Will the Fed have to increase interest rates rather than cut them, which is conventional wisdom says they're going to be cutting these interest rates. Not so fast. And I love how the Washington Post, just take a look at this afternoon. This is how the Washington Post is covering this. Biden convenes congressional leaders as federal shutdown deadline nears. And right in the first line there, we'll also focus on funding for Ukraine. So that's the main, remember, this is the main focus of this. This is what they really care about. So just read the very first 2 words here. With Ukraine running low on munitions. That's how they start off a U.S. government shutdown discussion is about Ukraine.
They don't care about you.
They do not care at all. And the Washington Post, of course, is just the mouthpiece for all of this at the Pentagon. If a portion of federal finances lapse just past midnight on Saturday, vital services at the Department of Transportation would go offline. That means buses for poor people, right? Food stamp programs could quickly run low on funding. Housing assistance for millions of families would fall into jeopardy because we care so much about the American people. We're really worried about the homeless problem in the United States and buses for people who don't have cars. They don't give a shit, really. I love the Washington Post. They're just pretending here. And then right away, it, slips down in here, and the Defense and State Departments will also expire. But in Ukraine, the situation is far more dire. Lawmakers and national security officials say. So it's more dire than the United States. Commanders there have already been ordering fighters to ration munitions in the nation's fight against Russia's 2-year-old invasion. Without U.S. defense assistance, experts say Russia will, of course, win. That's the bottom line. They will win this war.
Well, at least we're paying the pensions of those commanders, so they can, kind of afford the.
Right. David is correct. We have absolutely seen documentation showing that we are in our budgets covering the pensions and some of the state funds for Ukrainian citizens.
Yes.
And Ukrainian military. This is true.
Their government office. Yeah, exactly. And Putin's forces already captured the former Ukrainian stronghold of Avdiivka earlier this month, a battle in which, I love this, the Washington Post says this, without any evidence, but they just throw this sentence in here. They say, Russia beat at the Battle of Avdiivka earlier this month, a battle in which a lack of U.S.-provided arms proved decisive, officials say.
Please.
Officials say.
I mean, they're just banking on the fact that you don't know any better. The fact that they have an untrained military, that most of their trained military is dead. They're literally taking people with mental disabilities. We saw a video last week of a boy with Down syndrome, has no business on the battlefield. And they've never had good weapons. They've never been set up to win this war for people who don't want to be a part of Ukraine. They're just banking on the fact that you will swallow that because you don't know any better.
Yeah.
Did I hear you say that correctly? That the article stated that that Ukraine lost that Advika with the help of U.S. weapons?
Because we lacked it. Is that what they said, right?
Yeah, they said because they didn't have them. They didn't have enough of them. It was decisive. That's why they lost that battle. That's what they said. So,
and I was just going to say that that's the official way to say some people say, you know, like we're always heard on the news. Some people say that, and officials say that. I mean,
who are these people?
You don't know any better because you're swallowing our bullshit.
Right. So was it Victoria Nuland who said officials say? Can you name? Why don't you name who that person is? Well, are they trying to keep it secret? Like they surely would want their name out there and associated with this.
Because they just want to write that.
Yeah.
You don't need to have anybody then.
How many of you are really concerned about a U.S. government shutdown? Let me know in the chat. I'd love to see this. Let me know on Rumble and on YouTube. So, Virginia Congressman Bob Good said this morning that this is the only leverage that Republicans have right now, and they have to be willing to say no to these Democratic demands on the southern border and for the funneling of money into Ukraine. Watch.
Well, the government shutdown is not ideal, but it's not the worst thing. It would be worse to exacerbate the problem, to further increase our debt and our spending, to make our fiscal situation, which is unprecedented as it is, as you know, to continue to fund a government that's facilitating the border invasion. Why would we give Biden and Mayorkas billions and billions of dollars to keep doing this to the American people? The only leverage we have when we have one house of one branch is to be willing to say no.
Be willing to say no. That seems pretty reasonable, right? Right? Stop funding Ukraine. Stop funding a border invasion of the United States. Well, Ukraine flag people on Twitter or X were not happy with his position at all. Just so funny to see all of the Ukraine flags. And so he says, that's extremist drivel. What he just said there. That's extremist. It's extremist to not want to fund Ukraine. It's extremist to not want to make sure our borders are secure. You're an extremist. Here's another one. Tej Dilo, also a Ukraine flag in there and a Canadian flag. Wow, just to show that we can govern or get things done no matter how harmful to the American people. So what he's saying, like, response to you, this is going to be harmful to the American people.
Okay, but I would like to ask you, Tej Dilo, do you care that the American people are being harmed by funding a war continuously? Or do you care that the Ukrainian people are being decimated and dying out? Do you care about that? I'm just wondering, like, where do we decide to care? Is it like a chip on a board where we can only care about certain things?
Yeah, you're only allowed to care about certain things at a time. You can't. You can't talk about that right now. Diane in Ohio, here's one of my favorites. Not only does she have a Ukraine flag in there, she also has an Israeli flag in there. And she says, my guess is that's exactly what your constituents would expect from you. Your party seems to be cheering for the country to fail and for the American people to suffer because you think it helps you politically. Something is very wrong with that. So
again, Diane in Ohio, what do you get from funding Ukraine? What do you get as an American in Ohio that you're really caring about?
Well, if she's anything like the other, like Mike Rogers in Ohio, maybe she's near Dayton, Ohio, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, so she gets, maybe she gets defense money in some capacity. Who knows, right? Who knows what her motivations are for making sure that the defense contractors are getting their billions of dollars and that more people are dying, more innocent people are dying. But she also has an Israeli flag in there, so you know where her sentiments are. Military-industrial complex is what Diane loves, clearly, from her comments there. But yeah, and by the way, the American people will suffer
if we don't fund Ukraine.
Do you guys feel like you're going to suffer if we stop funding Ukraine? Like, do you think that your lives will suffer? Like, your kids will come home from school and dad's just sitting there with like a 6-pack of beer on his belly. Dad lost his job. Why'd dad lose his job? Because Zelensky didn't get billions more money. Why is Dad upset?
Well, okay, let's play this exercise out, right?
Okay.
We were lied to about Middle Eastern wars, weapons of mass destruction for years and years. We all maybe championing that on cable news. 90% of cable news pundits were pro-war. We believed it, right? Incubators, babies, all of that stuff. And then when that narrative slowly broke down and we all went back to our lives and we stopped that, how did that affect us? Not very much, I would say. We just sort of let that narrative dissolve, right?
Well, actually, what happened was, then, of course, we actually had an economy that started booming in the United States, right? That actually started happening in the United States.
Right.
So, I don't know, maybe there was some good things that happened in the United States.
Right. And so what should have happened is for us to say, that war was a lie. Maybe I won't fall for that again.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering why that lesson was not learned, these people with Ukrainian flags in their bio.
Well, and the border invasion is absolutely, to me, one of the most important issue in the United States right now, and what it's doing to our economy, what it's doing to what it matters for the 2024 election. I think this is the most important topic. You don't hear the Biden administration. The Biden administration right now is literally blaming Republicans for the sieve at the southern border. On day one, President Biden signed an executive order to undo, of course, what President Trump had put in place. So this is laughable. And by the way, they're in power. So how is it Trump's fault still? I love that they still blame him 3 years later or whatever.
Oh, yeah, they reversed what Trump had done, which was solving the problem, which was that people could get amnesty in Mexico because you're supposed to take it in the first, or not amnesty, but
asylum.
What's asylum in the nearest free country that you come upon, which would be Mexico. And then Biden reversed it, but then said they couldn't get something like that passed when it was already passed. So it's like, it's a complete lie.
Yeah. Yeah. So the U.S. southern border, of course, is, to my mind, the most important issue in the United States, and the child trafficking that's happening. But all of this is tied to the U.S. economy and what this is going to mean for voting, of course, in the 2024 election. So you think, wow, Trump's probably going to walk away with his victory like on a landslide. Not so fast. When you see the tens of millions of illegal immigrants that are being ferried around the United States and placed purposefully in different cities to affect the outcome of this upcoming election. I've just co-authored a report on this, and it's we dive into a lot of research on this. Go grab it. It's totally free. But we put together these sort of special reports. We're going to be doing this throughout the election year because I think these are really important topics. Go to redacted.inc/illegal to grab it right now. It's a free exclusive report on the border crisis and how it could lead to this election fraud and how it's already happening, by the way. It's no secret. Texas is a battleground state. And this is incredibly crucial to the outcome of the national election. So you're watching this unfold. Anyway, go grab this free report right now. It's great. Redacted.inc/illegal. All right, let's talk about Gaza. Well, here's a question for you. Why is Egypt building a large open-air prison right on the border with Gaza? Well, we now know it's, of course, to hold hundreds of thousands of Palestinians, but there's something shocking about this prison, even though it's on Egyptian soil. It's controlled by Israel. How does this work exactly? We'll get into that part of the story in a second. But first, the United States continues to carry out bombing attacks, multiple attacks inside Yemen, hitting Houthi targets. This is, of course, a war that the United States Congress has not authorized. Overnight, Houthis attacked the underground internet cables linking the Persian Gulf to Africa. It could take at least 8 weeks to repair it, according to sources today. So what exactly do they want? Well, they want the United States and the UK, of course, to stop funding and supporting the destruction of Gaza. One of the best journalists in the world is a woman by the name of Vanessa Beeley. She was recently at the border area in Gaza near the Rafah border crossing with Egypt, and she joins us today from Damascus, Syria. Nice to see you, Vanessa. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Clayton. Thanks for having me back on. It wasn't that recently, by the way. I was in Gaza in 2012, 2013.
Oh, okay.
Not recently,
okay.
although I wanted to try and go, but I think it's pretty impossible at the moment.
Right, but you're going to be able to speak to us about that border crossing and what you were seeing then before, of course, what is happening now there. But you cover this very, very deeply, and your reporting on this is some of the best in the world. So we'll get into that. I want to get your take first on, though, something that happened over the weekend in the United States in Washington, D.C. on Sunday. And how the U.S. media responded to this, I thought it was very telling. So a U.S. airman, U.S. Air Force officer, stood out in front of the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C., doused himself in an accelerant and then lit himself on fire. And he was yelling, "Free Palestine." And at the point before he lit himself on fire, he said, "I cannot be a party to this genocide. I will not be a party to it," as a U.S. Air Force officer. The mainstream media in the United States, though, seem to omit the part or any mention of Palestine, any mention of the Palestinians, just said that the guy, was crazy and committed suicide. And I couldn't help but thinking the parallels to when we saw during the Vietnam War protests and other individuals in the United States standing in front of the White House, lighting themselves on fire in protest of the war in Vietnam. And the mainstream media at the time covered it. They showed the images on the nightly newscasts of these individuals setting themselves on fire, but no mention of it in United States media. Did that surprise you?
No, not at all. And I think what was even more shocking was you could hear voices and the threat to actually shoot the guy even while he was on fire. Like, those voices were pretty close by, and not one of them tried to do anything about a man being on fire in front of them. I found that even more shocking, to be honest. Did they hear what he said? Did they know why he was there? I mean, it seems unlikely they didn't.
They drew the weapons on him, of course, and said, get on the ground, get on the ground. So you're pointing a live firearm at a guy that's on fire. But the mainstream media response to it, of course, omitted anything about Palestinians. And I just found that absolutely shocking.
Well, I mean, not really, because, they've been describing the pro-Palestine solidarity movements and protests across the world as far right, as Islamist extremist, as, they've done absolutely everything in their power, not only in the US, but in the UK, they've been labeled as far right extremists, racist, Islamist. I mean, the attempt to crack down on any dissident reaction to their country being involved in and complicit in what is a clear genocide of the Palestinian people has been extraordinary. And the kind of the spin that's been put on these protests, on anyone that is speaking out against their country being involved in genocide. It's shocking.
You're starting to see a change, perhaps. You're starting to see a number of countries now moving to put sanctions against Israel. You're seeing, of course, the courts now saying enough is enough, that they have no legal right to this land. We'll see what that actually means. But I want to talk about Egypt, and specifically the day-to-day attacks that we're seeing by the people that have now been forced down to the southern part of Gaza. For our audience that doesn't understand this, I mean, these people were told to go south, where they would be presumably safe, right? Get out of the north. We're dropping leaflets. We're going after Hamas terrorists. That was the message. If you remain here, you will be labeled a terrorist, so you better move south where, you'll be safe. That hasn't happened, has it?
Well, no. And I mean, the extraordinary thing now, the Zionist regime is talking about a ground incursion into Rafah. And people also need to understand that while officially the operation against Rafah hasn't started, they've been bombing heavily, massacring entire families for days now, if not actually the last 2 weeks, because I have a friend that I can get in contact with on a fairly regular basis who's been pushed from the north of Gaza and is now in Rafah itself with his sick parents. And they've been bombing areas of Rafah for, I think, around 10 days now, heavily, committing massacres inside Rafah already, even before the ground incursion. And the fact is that the Israelis are saying, well, okay, but if we push ahead with the operation in Rafah against Hamas, then we will evacuate the people. But where to? They've completely destroyed all infrastructure in the center of Gaza and the north of Gaza. In Gaza, in the north, you now have 700,000 people that are effectively under famine conditions. In central Gaza, there are some humanitarian aid trucks getting in, But when the civilians try to go and get food supplies, they're being fired on by Israeli tanks and snipers. And dozens are getting killed in this process alone. So where is the safe place for the people in Rafah to go to, except to try and get out through the border into Egyptian territory? Because there's nowhere else that is safe within Gaza itself right now.
So let's talk about this Egyptian question here. So at the border, a border you've been to, and heavily armed border with Rafah, on Rafah there. The Rafah, of course, is a city bisected by the border itself, so it's split between Egypt and in Gaza. These individuals are these Palestinians there are waiting at the border wall. They're there being slaughtered as we speak. But on the other side, there's a massive open-air walled prison, I guess is the only way to really describe it, being constructed over the past few months, few years. The area has been bulldozed and cleared out, and walls are going up. This is under Israeli control, as I understand it. So what do you think is about to happen here? Are we about to see hundreds of thousands of Palestinians forced through this border into this open-air prison?
Well, I mean, it certainly looks like that. The first images and footage of the construction of this area, which appears to be a completely walled-in area, similar, of course, to Gaza itself, but on a smaller scale. That came from, what was it, the Sinai Foundation for Human Rights that published these images. I think it was then CNN that actually provided substantiation for these claims by showing a satellite image of the works that are being carried out by Egypt on the Egyptian side of the Rafah border. But for people to understand, the border itself, so the border that you arrive at to get to Gaza on the Egyptian side, is quite a big complex, huge gates, which they very rarely open. Rafah crossing is actually closed more often than it's open, even prior to the present genocidal campaign by Israel. You then enter the border complex. You have to go through a series of checks and so on your papers, on your visa, on your permission to enter, etc. As a foreigner, I'm talking about. And then you actually have to take a bus from the Egyptian side across to the Palestinian side, where you have another kind of reception complex area, where you again go through other checks, but on the Hamas side.
So there's quite a buffer zone there.
There's quite a big buffer zone already.
Months ago here on the show, we showed images of aid trucks on the Egyptian side, which were parked there along, it seemed like a PR campaign, but it was all these aid trucks lined up along this long buffer zone. So it's not just a wall and you're on the other side like in the United States. There's quite a neutral zone there. So I just wanted to be clear about how you're describing it. You have to take a bus from one side.
But the reason you have to take the bus is because that buffer zone is under the control of the Israeli forces. So if, for example, I tried to walk that buffer zone, I would be shot.
I see.
So it's only the buses that are, legitimate that can pass that buffer zone, because you have security watchtowers, Israeli security watchtowers, all along the wall of that buffer zone. So even if Palestinians, for example, as they did actually in 2012 and 2014, when they were under heavy attack, they tried to escape through the buffer zone, and they were shot at both by Israeli forces and by Egyptian forces at that time to push them back into Rafah. And if you go back to 2005, September 2005, and the Philadelphia Accord, which the Israelis see very much as an extension of the 1979 Camp David agreement that was brokered by Menachem Begin, President Sadat of Egypt, and Jimmy Carter of the United States. Actually, the Israelis effectively have control of that buffer zone itself, right? And they perceive that as their territory. So presumably, although the open-air prison that is allegedly being built, I do have to say Egypt has denied the reports, but in my view, that doesn't mean a huge amount. And we'll come on to the reasons behind why Egypt might be prepared to accept so-called refugees from inside Gaza into Egyptian territory, provided, of course, they're enclosed in a secure area in another open-air prison, which in my view would then be under the control of the Zionists, because although it's not actually in the area that was agreed to be under Israeli control, it's connected to that area. So that's a moot point, who is actually going to have control over that area? I would suggest it would be the Israelis. And all of Saudi Arabia's claims that Egypt's claims that if Israel goes ahead with the Rafah operation, they're going to end the Philadelphia Agreement, which effectively will have the knock-on effect of breaking the Camp David Agreement, which of course will bring all the penalties on Egypt's head from Israel. So in my view, I think this is just rhetoric. And there's another reason, there's a very strong financial reason why Egypt might well allow this to happen, because it's under pressure from Saudi Arabia and UAE. Egypt has a debt of around 160 billion to Gulf state countries. 20% of that debt is owed to Saudi Arabia and UAE. Now, Saudi Arabia, UAE have a huge economic trade interest in normalizing relations with Israel. UAE was the first to do it in 2022. Saudi Arabia, again, is making noises about a Palestinian state before it normalizes. But in the meantime, it's investing, you confirmed that to me, it's investing huge billions of dollars into construction of, almost a continuation of its 5-minute NEOM city, which is going to be constructed in northwest Saudi Arabia, 60 kilometers away from Eilat in southern occupied territories, right?
Right.
So there's a lot of pressure on Egypt from Saudi Arabia and UAE. One, because of the investment in the Sinai. And if you imagine they want to build a kind of a Dubai in the Sinai, they're not going to want a tented Palestinian city in view, very much as the Zionists when they're building their settlements and when they're building. That's why they put the wall. They don't want to see the Palestinian enclaves.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, I can confirm, yes, there's massive billions of dollars going into a new marina in the Sinai. There's also a brand new PGA golf course that's going on where they hope to have PGA Tour events. You're not going to want to see a tented city of Palestinians begging for food nearby. So this is going to be a problem for all of this money flowing into this area, of course. Earlier, you mentioned, well, Benjamin Netanyahu over the weekend spoke to CBS Face the Nation and said that this operation is about to get started and it would last weeks, not months, he said. And they're going to go after 4 battalions of Hamas that they've identified in Rafah. They've taken out 18 of them. He said they're going to have to go after 4 of them in Rafah. Earlier, when you were talking about Hamas, you did air quotes that Israel is going after Hamas in Rafah. Can you clarify that? And what did you make of Netanyahu's comments over the weekend?
Well, it's kind of insane. We know that Israel is using effectively an AI genocide factory to delineate targets inside the Gaza enclave. And that means that actually the rate of kill is much higher than in previous wars that relied on human identification of human targets. Now you have an AI system that is effectively producing maybe 10 times the number of targets per day. Now, if that's the case, the huge majority of the 30,000 plus that have been massacred by Israel are civilians. 50% of that are children. We know this. So they're not targeting Hamas. They've never targeted Hamas. I was in Gaza in 2012 under a much lesser Zionist aggression, but nevertheless, it was horrifying. And the areas they were targeting, even back then, was essential infrastructure, hospitals, schools, families. If you see it in the kind of the prism of genocide, what they're doing is they're killing entire families, because they don't only target one house with one family and extended family members in it. They will go after another house in another area of Gaza with the same family and extended family members. So they effectively target an entire family, right? And the claims that they've wiped out Hamas battalions, why then are Hamas fighters still engaging in the north and firing rockets from the north, which in theory was completely cleared, and the IOF has actually evacuated the north to focus on the front with Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, and even in the center that is supposed to be under the control of Israeli forces, they're still coming under heavy attack from Hamas. The thing is, you can't wipe out Hamas, because Hamas isn't only Hamas. It consists of all of the resistance factions inside Gaza. I think there were 17 at the last count, and those include socialists, the PFLP, they include Christian, they include atheist factions. It's not even only Islamist. It's an ideology. Resistance is in the DNA of Palestinians, because they have endured more than 100 years of ethnic cleansing, rape, murder, torture, oppression. So you can't wipe out Hamas, and Israel knows this. So this sort of, when I say Hamas, this is just a pretext for them to continue the genocide.
So then their only answer is to have that area completely removed of Palestinians, completely removed, moved into this open air prison of the individuals that are left. And then the reconstruction can begin. And as we covered here last night on the show, and as you've been covering, the amount of money in 2021, Egypt has signed a reconstruction contract of Gaza so they are getting they have a monopoly on the reconstruction of Gaza, and they signed this contract back in 2021. I mean, they knew it was coming. So Egypt sort of plays this game like, we're the good guys here, we're the good guys here, but they're going to make a lot of money off of this reconstruction, are they not?
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, who's behind a lot of this construction is a guy called Ibrahim al-Arjani, who's incredibly close not only to Egyptian intelligence services, Egyptian military. He's effectively a Sinai warlord, a very powerful one, with direct connections to President Sisi. He has, I think it's a BMW franchise in partnership with the son of President Sisi. And he basically, his company or his group, the Organi group, had the reconstruction contract, and he effectively has control of the Rafah border on the Egyptian side. He's charging, 5,000 per adult, Palestinian adult, and 2,500 per child, even if that child is injured and desperately needs hospital care or hospital admittance, for them to go from Gaza into Egypt. And he's benefited, of course, from the tunnel trade, the trade of goods from Egypt into Gaza through the thousands of tunnels that I myself went through to enter Gaza in 2012. And, Egypt stands to profit, as you said, in the reconstruction of Gaza, but for who? We know that Israeli real estate companies are already putting out advertisements for real estates and condominiums on the coast in Gaza. And we also can't ignore the fact that there is, I can't remember how many cubic liters of gas off the coast of Palestine, not only off the coast of Palestine, but Syria, Lebanon, and Egypt for sure wants to be involved in the exploration for this gas. So there's a lot of advantages. And for Egypt, since 2007, they have effectively been reinforcing the blockade on Palestinians. Numerous presidents, even including Mohamed Morsi, who was in power for 1 year before he was basically deposed by President Sisi, was flooding the tunnels with sewage water. I was there when that was happening, both pre-Morsi and after. So Egypt has been instrumental under the pretext of security, which of course is exactly the same reason that Israel used to build the apartheid wall illegally in the occupied territories, right? And for the same reason, Egypt has blockaded Palestinians from the Egyptian side.
Unbelievable. Well, we'll be continuing to watch this. I know Vanessa, you can follow Vanessa's Substack. We'll link it up in the description below. One of the finest journalists in the world covering this story. So we really thank you for everything you've been exposing here and covering. Thank you so much, Vanessa.
No, thank you so much, Clayton.
My pleasure. Thanks so much, Vanessa. And, you know, I should point out as I can't help but think about this. The AI piece of that story is unbelievable to me. Like we've written up, you know, AI is about inputs, right? Like what are you putting into the program? Software is only as good as the inputs, right? The prompts. So can you imagine being the people that are sitting there at a computer prompting this software? Like what inputs are you putting in that is allowing the targeting of children, is allowing the targeting of families?
What are you saying? Like,
well, what I'm saying is
you're writing a program to kill people from this region, so you would use data points such as skin color, height, hair color, and things like that. Is there an input that you can distinguish between a terrorist and a non-terrorist?
Yeah. What is the terror? Like he's wearing a green
computer software.
He's wearing a green bandana and he's yelling something. Like what is the prompt that allows an AI program to distinguish?
And humans can't even do that very well. We've seen reports of civilian kills in Somalia where they said, well, you know, this woman was running away and because her burqa was, you know, of a certain color or what have you, we thought she must be a combatant. Those kind of things don't add up, right? Humans are not able to do this. So this seems to be...
Go ahead, Phil.
Yeah. You're talking about a technology that like, you know, AI can't distinguish that humans have 5 fingers, not 6. You know, until you're trusting technology like that. And it's like, I'm not even being flippant. Like you're trusting technology like that to distinguish combatants from non-combatants when it really doesn't have the ability to think or reason. That's just frightening.
Kenny in our chat, Kenny says AI doesn't need prompts. Well, I mean, it depends on what AI. I mean, who knows how their software is working? And that's why I want to dive more deeply into that part of the story. Exactly. Yeah, it does. I mean, you need to build a series of prompts. And just think about ChatGPT writing prompts.
It learns from something. It starts from something.
Right. So you need to have inputs.
But we know that during the Obama administration, they decided to classify anyone who was of military age living in certain Middle Eastern countries, particularly Syria, Somalia, Libya, as a combatant, as long as they just were male and of military age. So perhaps that has been extended to now Palestinians. Just, you know, sorry for you if you are of military age, but that doesn't track because, like she said, 50% of the casualties are children.
Right. So again, focusing on the children. And the other big story here that no one's really talking about is most of these children now, their parents have been killed. A lot of these children are there without parents. And of course, as we've covered here on the show, forget whatever religion you care about. I don't care at this point. I really don't. I'm over it. These children matter. And the amount of child trafficking that unfolds in this region right now is unbelievable. And it's going to get even worse. So where do these children wind up? Where do these children go? What pedophiles are getting their hands on these children? And we should all care about that.
This is horror upon horror.
Yeah.
That just putting
and
that
it's happening.
horror behind this horror, I can't.
Yeah, and I'm not here to say that it's not. It is happening. Okay, it's happening at our U.S. southern border. It's happening right here. It's happening anytime there's a war or a displaced group of individuals, and where there's no accounting of who the parents are because they've been killed. They have had to stay back with the grandparents. Where are the children? They're being sold off right now. That's exactly what's happening. And we should all wake up and pay attention to this, regardless of where you come down on your support of any of this. That's, to me, the most important part of this story. Okay. We've got more news to get to here on your Tuesday. We're going to look at Navalny and, of course, new information coming out about his death that really has thrown everything for a loop in the West. The Western intelligence community might be having their heads spin a little bit, or is this exactly what they want? We're going to get into the death of Navalny in just a moment. And we're also going to talk about the Canadian trucker convoy now suing The Trudeau administration. We've been waiting for this to happen. We'll get there in a second. But first,
we want to tell you about our friends over at Aura. Now, do a Google search for your name or your email address, and you will find that there are things there that you did not put there or you do not want out there in the ether of whatever search site that you're using, because data brokers sell your information when you put it in input places that you might not think of, and then you are no longer in control. So cleaning up your name and information is a good practice to do, but it's stressful. That's why we use Aura. Aura is the sponsor of today's video, and they show you which data brokers are selling your information, and they automatically submit opt-out requests. Cleaning up your information not only helps reduce the amount of spam that we get, but it also protects me from hackers who could use this information to help them access my social media accounts, bank accounts, and other sensitive information. Aura also does so much more to protect me and my family from online threats, things that I can't see. There are other features like antivirus, VPN, password management, parental controls, identity theft, insurance, and more, all without having to download separate apps. That's why it's a great idea to check out Aura and their many different services, because their main goal is to keep you safe and protected online, and also to reduce the amount of noise about you in your life. So if you value your privacy, go to aura.com/redacted. Again, that's aura.com/redacted, and start your free 2-week trial. Stop data brokers from exposing your personal information. Go to our sponsor, aura.com/redacted, and get a 14-day free trial and see how much of your information is being sold. Once again, that's aura.com/redacted.
Stoplight in our chat says, hey, I think Redacted needs a few more mods to keep stuff a bit civil, or don't they want that?
Like chat mods?
Yeah, I mean, we have a few mods, and that's fine. And look, just keep it civil. And what I don't want in our chat room, we have a great group of people, a lot of learners, lifelong learners here, people who are challenging their assumptions about the world. I hope that when you're watching our show, that maybe if you come in with a certain viewpoint on the world and we present facts to you, maybe that will maybe change your mind. Here are facts. You know, you don't get your own set of facts. You have your opinions, but hopefully they're informed by facts. So I hope everyone stays civil. And also, please don't jump on someone. Like, if you find someone in the chat is uneducated, they're not a reader, they don't read books, they don't understand what's going on, and they just blindly say something stupid, don't jump on those people. Like, I feel like maybe we should encourage them, read a book, pick up a few pieces of literature, understand more, but instead of jumping down their throat, early days, when we were covering the war in Ukraine, we would get people that would say, oh, you guys are just Putin apologists. Now those people have drifted away because I think they understand the truth has come out, and maybe more and more people became educated about what's actually going on there. So now more and more people understand that. But don't jump on those people. Just try to encourage them to read and learn more, and just be civil about it, right?
Okay.
That's my
Clayton
take.
being dad right now.
Yeah, just be civil, and just read books. And I think, if you jump down someone's throat about it, it's not helpful, right? Because then they're not going to want to go and learn more about a subject and actually educate themselves. So that's how we can deal with trolls. Just, not be mean to them, but maybe encourage them to pick up a book.
Yeah. When I get crappy things said to me on X, I just say, okay, show me your reading list. Okay.
No, show me the research.
You're gonna say some stuff to me. Okay, show me your reading list. And if someone's not doing the same amount of research as you, then they can call names, and then
I would say please provide specific sources, and please provide us with the peer-reviewed studies that show and support this. Please do, and I'll look at it and I'll read it. But they don't, because they don't have that. They just get emotional about it. So don't jump down those people's throats. Encourage them to read more. I think that's a very encouraging thing. By the way, I should mention, I linked up in the description of this video a great book on Palestine if you want to learn more about the history going back to World War I about this area, and of course what has unfolded. Ilian Pape has written a great book called The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine. I've linked it up in the chat below. You can, in the comments, the description, if you want to check out that book. Again, whatever your preconceived notions about a subject, okay, just go in and read and learn, and learn from the facts that are present, and question everything, I think.
I was going to say, we all have our own personal journeys for how we take information. We were all there once, and we learn as we go, and we understand the nuances of things. And so, like, they might not be there in that journey yet. So, like, you're not going to get them there by yelling at them. You get them there by guiding them to information. Like, you guide a horse to water, you can't make it drink, right?
Right.
Kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Incidentally, Ilian Pape has agreed to come on Redacted, but
Great.
we're trying to schedule that. So if you are a fan of his books, I've read at least 2 so far, learned a lot from them. Study up. We'll have a guest soon, you guys.
Yeah, great set of
There's a
books.
little homework for you. Exactly what you want from your news program is
Right.
homework.
Well, we hope.
And I want 2 pages, double spaced.
If you don't want to learn, go and watch, CNN or the mainstream media. But if you do want to learn something, we are lifelong learners here, and so is our audience, and you guys are readers, and so that's the type of audience that we have here. People that want to learn and improve themselves and challenge their worldviews, whether it's climate change, things that you were told and horse-fed about anything. Learn and then maybe change your viewpoints on it. All right, we've got more news to get to. Let's talk about Navalny.
All right. Well, did Ukraine kill Alexei Navalny? The reason we think this now is because they're saying that he died of natural causes. That's weird, right? This is a case of shifting narratives and also a whodunit. When we had Gilbert Doctorow on last week to talk about this, now he thinks the Brits did it. And what he said was possibly they could have used any of these Ukrainian spies inside of Russia because they can pass. They speak perfect Russian. They have no accent. And so now Ukraine is coming out and saying, oh, no, guy died of natural causes. When he was on this program, and we're going to show you that in a second, I said, this is like an episode of Stranger Things with, the Russian spies and all of that, and an episode of Bourne Identity put together, but it is not fiction. It's crazy. So let's see if we can unpack this. And it's a matter of who done it. On the one hand, it's not funny, even though he was kind of an odious character, because he was used by the West and it would seem was assassinated when he used up his youth's value, when the gum lost its flavor, so to speak. And on the other hand, it's wild, right? So I don't want it to seem like I'm super intrigued like this, like a spy novel. But at the same time, I want to look at, I think it's a lesson for us in how the West chews up and spits out people like this. And it's dangerous. Lesson to you, if they come along and offer you to be the next Alexei Navalny, don't do it. This is how you'll end up, right? Somebody in our chat the other day said, take a dirt nap. Is what they call it.
A dirt nap?
Right?
Yeah,
that means you die, basically. Yes. Okay. So Ukraine intelligence confirmed this week that Alexei Navalny died of a blood clot, as reported by the Federal Penitentiary Service of Russia. Here's Ukraine's intelligence chief, Krylo Budanov, saying this to the press.
ГУР мається на увазі і вам особисто, як вбили Навального і чи, сумніви є. Я можу вас розчарувати, але те, що нам відомо...
So he's saying, I may disappoint you, but what we know
більш-менш підтверджено. Тобто
is
це те, що ми знаємо.
He actually died from a blood clot.
Давайте так вам скажу, але, на жаль...
I may disappoint you. I know that's not what you want to hear.
Well, why would he say this when President Biden and all Western allies are saying, oh, no, Putin killed him. For sure, he was assassinated. And now Ukraine, which is aligned with the West, is saying, no, natural causes, we know it, sorry. Well, this is fishy because the West is using the Navalny conspiracy to ramp up war with Russia. The West wants Navalny to have been a victim of abuse. And this guy, again, aligned with the West, is saying that Russia was not responsible then for Navalny's death, specifically Putin, who they want that story so badly. And it lends credence to the theory that maybe the West did have something to do with it. Just to remind you, the U.S. government and Western press loves to say that Navalny was Putin's biggest enemy and that Putin tried to poison him personally in 2020. None of those things could be corroborated. The poisoning was never proven. Navalny was certainly not Putin's biggest enemy. He was barely a fly in Putin's world. On those long-standing lies, I refer you to this video we did after his death was announced just a few weeks ago. So let's just agree that the West tells lies regularly about Alexei Navalny, and now we can consider why they may be telling the truth or a new lie, right? So the lie about him being poisoned by Novichok in 2020, we know that has a bunch of holes in it. Now they're saying his death was natural, which makes me think that's a lie and he was assassinated. Is it possible that he died of a blood clot? Sure, it's possible. Blood clots are going around, as they say. But also, his blood work was published in The Lancet after his alleged poisoning in 2020, showing that he was not a healthy man. This was the journal article that was published after his treatment. It showed that he was on medication for liver problems. He had indication of possible cancerous tumors. He had pancreatitis. He was on medication usually associated with people with Parkinson's disease. Now, last week we
People
asked...
wanted to know where this, I'm seeing in the chat, someone's, where did you get this information? It's right here on your screen. It's from The Lancet, which is?
It's a weekly medical journal, and they published his blood work after he was evaluated and treated at a hospital in Germany. Now, and we talked about how they were never able to prove Novichok. Plus, Novichok, you don't just accidentally not die from Novichok.
One drop of it will kill an elephant.
It's pretty stinking poisonous.
And everyone in the
room,
room,
just get over it.
Everyone in the room needs to be fully in a hazmat suit if it even is close by.
Or if they suspect it, right? So they're saying that all these doctors suspected Novichok, but no one ever geared up, which is weird. Okay, where was I? Oh, last week we asked political scientist Gilbert Doctorow about the possibility that Navalny's death was not because of fair play, and maybe it was because of these pre-existing health conditions, and he just could not get on board with this possibility. Watch. Is there maybe a possibility that it was his time? I don't know. He still was pretty young. I don't put a lot of stock into that either. Your face shows no.
Yeah. Well, look, the timing is just too good.
Yeah.
As I said, it's the anniversary of the Skripal case in a former Russian election. The Skripal case was all about Novichok, which was being made in a chemical warfare laboratory very close to Salisbury, where the Skripal father and daughter fell ill, and we have the coincidence that Mr. Navalny's wife, now widow, who just happened to be in Munich at the time so that she could make a guest appearance and condemn Mr. Putin for his vicious murder of her husband. These are very nice coincidences. But let's go back to your question about his being ill. Yes, he was a sick man. Some of it may have been from genetic or other bad luck, chronic illnesses that he came down with. But it is also widely known that Mr. Navalny took narcotics. It is also known that because people have asked, how could the Brits possibly have brought some poison into this very remote place under close watch? It was a high security prison colony after all. How could they do that? Well, I'd like to mention one detail, that Mr. Navalny's lawyer saw him 2 days before he died. And it is not inconceivable that he was used, he was duped by British intelligence agents or other intelligence agencies to give Mr. Navalny some medication or some narcotics or who knows what, which he took in good faith. Now, the other possibility, which I think is very real, in answer to questions, again, how could the Brits do this, is that the British have very close cooperation with Ukrainian intelligence agents across Russia. And there are many such agents. We know that because of very little discussed, but real cases of sabotage that are going on daily in various places across the enormous expanse of the Russian Federation. And these cases of sabotage, of course, are being carried out by people in the pay of Ukrainian intelligence agents or the agents themselves.
Okay, so that tracks, right? So he's saying it's possible the British wanted this done because they're off the leash from the American government, and they are very close with the Ukrainians, and that the Ukrainians could have got this done very easily. And then right on cue, the Ukrainians come out and say, oh no, totally natural, right? It was natural. So it isn't even, it's not that crazy, right? Now the Ukrainians are saying, poor Navalny, one of those things, don't know what happened. What Dr. O says in this video, which I hope you'll watch and seek out under this title, he says the Brits did it again because they are motivated to help Ukraine. They thought it was good timing. They could blame this on Russia. He says that Russia has and will continue to respond because, as odious as Navalny was, he's still a Russian citizen and they cannot have their citizens murdered on their own soil. You can find more of Dr. O's great writing on his Substack. It's called the Armageddon Newsletter. I'd like to refer you to this. Now, so is it just, are the Ukrainians implicating themselves here? What do you think?
It's so fishy. I just find the timing so odd. But it comes right at a moment when Congress is debating the merits of sending another $60 billion to Ukraine. So they need this propaganda on their side. They need us to believe that Putin killed Navalny, right? This is part of their
But if
narrative.
the Ukrainians are now saying he didn't, that blows a hole in that narrative. And
Right.
it's like, then why did they need him dead?
Exactly.
Well, I guess who is that guy that's saying it? Like, is he?
Well, he's
Well, he's from Ukrainian
Well, he's
defense.
Yeah. He's the Ukrainian intelligence. So this is like their CIA, which is run by our CIA. Now, he's not saying anything, of course, unless our CIA tells him to say it. So again, it's absolutely fascinating. How is he saying this? Our CIA runs the show there. I mean, make no mistake about it, right? Just read the New York Times over the past few days to see the CIA's station operations inside of Ukraine. So I don't know. It's very interesting to me. And then just a few minutes ago, Mike Johnson came out of the White House just a few minutes ago and just announced that he's not sending any more money to Ukraine. He told President Biden in a one-on-one closed door meeting, I'm not sending any more money to Ukraine unless we shut down the southern border. Like, he's like, Mr. President, I understand your position on Ukraine. Sorry, we're not doing it. So they need this. They're begging for this money. This seems like it's a weird thing to come out and say.
But that's only how it affects the United States, right? And so could it have been just the UK and Ukraine saying Navalny has used up his usefulness, let's get rid of him, move on. Maybe we can have a new Navalny. Maybe we can revive this through his wife. Maybe we can, I don't know.
Well, yeah, there is a new Navalny rising in Russia right now. And if this Navalny is behind bars, that doesn't really help their cause at all to run against Putin, right? And to lead an opposition party in any kind of larger way out of prison. So
it's very Italian mafia, no natural causes, right?
Yeah,
that's how it reads
it was a blood
to
clot.
me.
People asking how many jabs did he get?
Look, if we don't start saying that it was natural causes, there's enough information pointing back to the CIA. We need to squash this narrative right now. We tried to say it was Putin, but it's falling apart. The narrative's falling apart. There's too much information. So let's just say it was natural causes and go about our day.
Right. Yeah. Philip,
and maybe also it's that they don't want, now we're going to investigate the body. We want to do a deeper dive on his corpse and look into this. And you're going to clearly see that there's UK and Ukrainian intelligence operation that killed the guy. And they're like, no, he's dead. Natural causes. Let's move on. You don't need to look at the body. You don't need to look at the body at all.
How do you clearly see that? Let's let Philip talk. He's been trying to jump in.
Has he?
Oh, no, that's fine. I started to, yeah. So I think a good indicator of this will be if the U.S. politicians remain silent on it, then I imagine this intelligence chief will just quietly disappear. And so I think that'll be a good indication as to where the truth is if we don't acknowledge it and that guy just, you never hear from him again, because that right. tells you that we definitely had something to do with it. Because, it's not like they're going to say, hey, they killed Navalny, who was, according to like the U.S., like, was this great man. He's dead now because of Putin. And if they're like, actually, no, it was natural causes, and they don't, what do they do? Come out and say, oh, we got it wrong, but still Putin sucks.
Or if Zelensky is quiet on it and doesn't undercut his his intelligence chief.
Because something Zelensky said was Navalny today, the rest of Europe tomorrow, right? What happened to him is going to happen to the rest of us. Oh, natural causes? Never mind. We don't care about him. Screw that guy.
I guess that still rings true on a long enough timeline. Eventually, yes, everybody
after 60 years
of something.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of assassinations, I want to bring your attention to this because a man has reportedly been arrested in Moscow for a failed assassination attempt on journalist Tucker Carlson. The man says in this video that he was offered $4,000 from Ukraine to plant a car bomb to target Carlson while he was in Russia in a parking garage. We'll watch what he says, but I want to point out that the Gateway Pundit even says that these reports are unconfirmed. But again, it tracks what Dr. O said about Ukrainians passing as Russians and carrying out these spy missions, assassination missions inside of Russia.
Я Васильев Петр Алексеевич, 88 года рождения, уроженец Подольска. В ноябре 23 года был завербован сотрудником ГУР Украины через сеть интернет. Проходил обучение работе спецспека со спецсвязью, сбора подрывов взрывных устройств, а также работе с тайниками. 31 января куратор получил задание забрать с тайника взрывное устройство и использовать его для подрыва автомобиля.
Что вам обещали?
Здесь вознаграждение $4000.
Где должно было быть применено взрывное устройство?
На подземной парковке отеля «Фашизм» в Москве. Необходимо было забрать взрывное устройство из тайника и заложить его под транспорт.
Против кого планировалось применить взрывное устройство?
Ну, сообщили.
Сейчас вы знаете, кто был целью?
Да, американский журналист Такер Карлсон.
Что пошло не так?
На этапе подготовки был задержан, содеянным раскаиваюсь.
Seems very strange.
Yeah.
I'm sorry for what I did. And it was all like point by point by point. This is
scripted.
What happened.
Yeah,
Scripted,
clearly.
Yeah.
So strange, right? These are strange things. We're not telling you we have answers. We're telling you we have tons more questions. I'm sure you do too. So let us know what your questions are. What you think. Is it in fact spy novel-esque?
Let us know your thoughts. All right, Lady Trucker in the chat says, hello, Redacted Rebels. Hello to my fellow truckers out there in Canada. Thank you, Redacted, us truckers. Yes, Truckers for Trump 2024. Yes, we definitely support the truckers in Canada. So hello to you. Alan Vestal says, you can lead a Democrat to logic, but you can't make them think. Alan, thank you for your super chat as well. We've got more news to get to here. We're going to talk about Canada in just a second. We've got two stories out of Canada, but it's not just about Canada. These are broader, massive implications around censorship, around online hate, around the future of medical freedom. All of these things we're going to talk about in just a second. But first, we want to tell you about our friends over at Hillsdale College. Now, time is our most precious commodity, and I've heard from so many of our listeners who have asked for our advice on how do we spend it wisely, how do we improve ourselves, you know, how do you find the time to be able to do these things, or whether it's read a book or learn something new. You know, you're so busy with other things, how can you carve out this time? Well, that's why we're so excited to tell you about our friends at Hillsdale College. They're offering more than 40 free online courses right now in the most important and enduring subjects that you can find. You can go on there right now for free using our link and find up to 40. You can study the works of C.S. Lewis, which is great to learn about, the stories of the book of Genesis, the meaning of the U.S. Constitution, which I think we should all take that course. Everyone could learn a thing or two about the U.S. Constitution right now, including our members of Congress. The rise and fall of the Roman Republic, if you want to see how great civilizations collapse. You're literally seeing parallels in the United States right now to the Roman Empire. So it's important for us to understand our history. Anyway, you can try it all for free. I personally recommended The American Citizenship and Its Decline. I signed up for that course by Victor Davis Hanson. It's an 8-lecture course. I'm already through the first two courses, or the first two lectures in it. It's really good. The history of citizenship in the West and the threats that it faces today. So right now, go to hillsdale.edu/redacted to start. It's free and it's easy to get started. Again, that's hillsdale.edu/redacted to start.
Canadian taxpayers have funded another hate science study by the same doctor who published a fraudulent study showing that the unvaccinated were a threat to the vaccinated. This is something we spoke about last month with Dr. Regina Wattiel. She's the author of the book Fisman's Fraud. We spoke about how her book was pointing out that the Canadian government commissioned a study to use fictitious models to justify vaccine mandates. As her book has been taking off in the last month, the same scientist has now published a study about the efficacy of masks, which is not based on real-world data, which he could have, but instead he used models. So we're going to try and go through it, see if the Canadian government will try this again with the same Dr. Regina Wattiel who joins us today. Thank you for coming back on Redacted.
Oh, thanks for having me here, Natalie. My pleasure.
Okay, so since you have been on Redacted, your book has become a #1 bestseller on Amazon, which is super exciting. So people are starting to notice that the Canadian government used fake science to put in place COVID policies. Since then, the same guy, David Fisman, published another study about masks. Can you take us through it? Because it's a convoluted study. It almost reads like fiction.
Well, it is a very difficult study to understand, Natalie. And the researchers came up with some pretty inventive, unconventional techniques to get the results they wanted. So this study was difficult, not just for the layperson, but even scientists are scratching their heads wondering what these researchers did. And I had to read this study several times to really get the full picture. So I'll start by saying that whenever you have a observational.
Well, first of all, before you do that, what is their big conclusion? That's masks work to curb the transmission? That they work really well. Okay.
Highly effective, saved lots of lives and lots of monetary benefits. So overall, they're saying that masking is a huge success.
Okay.
So when you have an observational study making those kind of claims that is highly effective at curbing transmission and you've got massive benefits, then it's highly likely there's something either wrong with the data or the methodology or the interpretation of their study. So in this case, we have problems with all three. And it's it's not really a surprise given who conducted the study. This study was written by 5 researchers out of the University of Toronto. And as you mentioned, David Fisman was one of the main authors, as was Ashley Tweet. Both of those worked on the fraudulent science that was used to scapegoat unvaccinated Canadians. So both of them worked on this study along with 3 other colleagues. So I'm just going to take you through, there's 3 big issues with this study. So first, it has to do with the data they used. So they didn't completely fabricate the data like they did last time. Last time, when they were scapegoating the unvaccinated, they used a computer model simulation to simulate fake data that showed unvaccinated were a greater risk. This time, they look at Ontario data in 2020. So when you look at the pandemic, it was called in the winter months, at the end of winter in 2020. Then in the summer, municipalities in Ontario started bringing in mask mandates. But even though mask mandates were in play, you still seen a rise in COVID cases into the fall, and especially as you head towards winter. But at that point, the researchers stopped their observational period. But even so, you see that in the fall with mask mandates in the recorded data, the cases were higher than the pre-mask period in the first wave. So this is where things get really interesting. So the researchers claim that the recorded cases were a lot lower than what really happened. That if Ontario had actually done more testing, especially with younger individuals, then more cases would have been recorded. So they invent this new method to estimate the cases that would have been recorded had Ontario done this extra testing. So they apply a formula to the real data to inflate the data, but they inflate the data, especially before the masking in the first wave.
So they're basically giving you an uncertainty principle, saying it would have been worse. And so we are considering these high case numbers a success because we want to.
Well, they're basically saying, here's the real data, but the real data is an undercount. So we're just going to inflate those numbers using our method to what we think are the real cases. And then they inflate the numbers in the first wave more so than in the fall after the mandates. So if you look at the data in the first wave, they increase those case counts by up to 25 times what we actually recorded, depending on the week. And then after masks were introduced, they inflated up to 4 times as much. So now it looks like the first wave was way higher than that second one, and that mask did something.
We're just going to take them. Okay. We're going to take the numbers we don't like and multiply them by 25, and then take the numbers we do and multiply them by less. And that proves our point. Okay. Do you think that the real world data about masking already shows us that this is not true?
Well, you do have an increase in cases after the masking occurred. But the story gets even funnier when you look at what the modelers did next, because they did something that I have really never seen before. They now take those fudged data, right, and they fit a model to that fudged pretend data and pretend it has validity. So then they're not really looking at the real data anymore. They're using their pretend numbers, what they think is the real case, and they're modeling it. And this is the second problem with their model. They fit this model that is quite useless. They put factors in there that make the model difficult to interpret. And if you were to extend this model past 2020, it would completely fall apart. And just to give you an indication, this is more of a nerdy thing. I look at it and they fit like a cubic time trend. And what that means is, if you were to extend this model out a few years, it would be a wonder anyone in Ontario would be left standing.
Okay.
It's truly
like
apocalyptic.
A good math joke.
Yeah, it is. And you look at, but to be fair, they don't extend it past 2020 because it's absurd.
Right.
So they fit this fake data to a model, and then they misinterpret the model to get the results they want.
Okay. So because these are powerful people who last time were able to make a fictitious study that the government used to put in place policy to inflict on Canadian citizens, do you think, is it your worry that this will be used to reinstate mask mandates at any given time?
Well, it's being used to justify mask mandates. So certainly they're making the case as to why we should use them in a pandemic. And like you said, this was co-funded by the Ontario government, but also the Institute for Pandemics. So if you recall from the book, I mentioned how FISMIN has been promoted to lead the modeling unit in the Institute for Pandemics. And they seek to be a global leader in helping the world through the next pandemic. So this study was actually published in the United States in an American journal. And this study was actually presented at a public health seminar at Yale University. So I guess the Canadian researchers are helping the US understand the benefits of masking.
Now, just this week in Australia, the Supreme Court has ruled that vaccine mandates were against the Constitution, that they were illegal. And so now Australia is going to be hit with a slew of litigation for people who lost their jobs and lost a lot during vaccine mandates. So in those cases, this is me guessing, it's possible that when governments go to defend these policies, such as mask mandates, they can use studies like this in their litigation. And that's why these might be useful, because the rest of us can maybe see through it and be grateful that there's no mask mandates in place right now. But do you think that provides a use value for these types of studies?
It for sure does. And even in Canada, we have a lot of studies, even by FISMN, that are being used in legal proceedings to penalize those who did not follow the pandemic measures and to justify what the government did. So since I was on Redacted last, I have been contacted by lawyers who are defending people who are in legal proceedings, including doctors who are at risk of losing their license because they didn't go along with the pandemic measures and the safe and effective narrative regarding the vaccines.
Wow. Okay. Well, maybe tell us a little bit more about what you've been up to since you were last on Redacted, because you did have not only success with your book, but success with lawmakers who are saying, oh, I see this now in a way I hadn't before. Let's make sure this doesn't happen again.
Right. So there are a small group of politicians here in Canada that are not on board with what the government did. And I have met with them, and we're discussing how to proceed and to make changes. So that's promising. Also, since Redacted, a lot of people are more aware of the fraudulent studies that went into justifying the pandemic measures. And like I mentioned, I have been contacted by lawyers and individuals who are in legal proceedings to see how my book can help them in their proceedings. So that's also very promising. The other thing is that when I look at things like the mask mandate and other studies by FISMN, it becomes clear that there is a big pattern here, but he's not the only one fudging the numbers. So I have been looking into other researchers who have fudged the numbers to kind of put the screws to unvaccinated. So in particular, I'm currently working on something that was done by the Ontario Science Table here, and I'm trying to show how they fudged the numbers to put the screws to unvaccinated workers. So that's up and coming, and I'm pretty excited about that one because there's a lot of workers right now who are going after their employers for being terminated or put on leave without pay.
Now, I did notice that FISMN took notice of some of the media that you've been doing and the success of your book. And he wrote on X that, oh, yes, I remember this conspiracy. Ha ha, it's funny. This is making my paper do better, actually. So it was a very condescending tweet. But it seems to me that maybe he's rattled by this. Have you heard any response other than this kind of dickish tweet?
No, I haven't heard any other response, but that tweet actually made me laugh a little bit because I'm thinking, well, haha, he's laughing now, but I wonder if he'll still be laughing when his papers get completely destroyed in courts and he loses all credibility when it comes to anything to do with this pandemic. So we'll see who's laughing in the end.
Okay. I have, I would interview him if he wanted to come on Redacted. It's fair for him to defend this. So if it crosses your path, he can come on here and tell us how he came up with these things too. I'm willing to learn and listen. So thank you again for bringing us this data, this hate science, this concept of hate science. And again, Regina's book is FISMN's Fraud. You can find it on Amazon. Give it a review, share it with your friends. And you can follow her on X as well. Thank you so much for coming back.
Thank you very much, Natali. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
It's great having her. Thank you so much. And so, yeah, last time she was on, of course, we mentioned her book, FISMN's Fraud, and it was being shadow banned by Amazon. And then so many of you went out and bought the book. And we said, please buy a couple copies of it and donate it to your local library, get it in their systems, force people to read this. And so many of you did. It shot up to #1 on the Amazon charts. So it became a bestseller, I think.
Right.
On top of that, I've heard some people that have actually bought it and taken it to their library. We got an email from one viewer who said that he or she, I forget exactly, took like 5 copies to multiple libraries to get them registered in the system. And then when they went online to do a search for the book through their software system, it just showed up as not found.
Oh.
Even though they registered with it. So maybe it just hasn't been updated yet, or it's being shadow banned even at libraries. So anyway, the book is called Fisman's Fraud, and we'll link it up in the description as well of the episode, so you guys can go and download it, buy it, support it, and try to get the message out about this book. Go ahead, Philip. Sorry.
I would be very surprised. I know I've mentioned this before, but I'd be very surprised if a library was trying to ban a book, because they're like, in my experience, I used to work for a university library system at Ball State in the science library, and like librarians are traditionally some of the biggest proponents of free speech that you will find. Like,
yeah,
they're the people that they want all the books there.
So hopefully,
I would be surprised.
Yeah, hopefully in response to this person who emailed this morning, actually, Natalie and I don't know if you responded to him or her, but yeah, maybe it's just not updated in their software just yet.
Perhaps,
so hopefully
perhaps.
That's the case.
We also know that this book was mentioned in Canadian Parliament just today, and one parliamentary member said, "Oh, I'm not going to discuss that. That person's a MAGA extremist," which they're in Canada. Did she not know that? And which is just something that people say when they don't want to debate certain topics on the merit of the topics. Then they say, oh, conservative, bad, we don't have to think about it, we don't have to listen to it, that they're just giving her a label. She's not. There's no politics in her book. She is just dissecting a paper that was made up, and the data did not support the policies that were inflicted on the Canadian people. That's not really political. It is used as politics by people who refuse to see this.
Yeah.
So anyhow, I'm excited to see how it was brought up in Canadian Parliament. Go ahead, Philip.
Well, can we explore just briefly the idea of a MAGA, a Canadian MAGA, a Canadian Make America Great Again, like extremists, like that are there Canadians that are that into making America great? Wouldn't they be like MACAs?
Macas or Canada?
I don't know.
Well, I mean, Trudeau told us a few weeks ago, he told us 2 weeks ago, right, that
Tucker Carlson was a MAGA extremist?
No, remember he stood up in Parliament and said the opposition wants to make Canada great again, and that's what we don't want here. So they don't, like, Trudeau does not want to make Canada great again.
No, they don't like that.
Yeah, they do not like that. We've got more news to get to here. I just want to call out, we have a first-time viewer in our live stream tonight. First time watching live, Meg, I think Meg Pie said, first time watching live. Hey, welcome, Meg. Nice to see you in the chat. Nice to see you guys. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern time, so thank you guys for joining us here. We got more news to get to. We're going to talk about their trucker convoy in just a moment, because they are unleashing a massive lawsuit against Justin Trudeau. What are they asking for? How will this go? We're going to dive deeply into that in just a moment.
All right, but first we want to tell you about our friends over at Genucel, because, ladies and gentlemen, whether you have 3 minutes in the morning or 30, you can keep your face wrinkle-free with Gen 90. That's the new instant wrinkle treatment from Genucel. Gen 90 instantly reduces the appearance of wrinkles anywhere you use it, around the eyes, the forehead, crow's feet, laugh lines, even your chin. It starts working in seconds, so you never worry about your skin or your confidence again. Gen 90 is luxurious, nourishing, and silk smooth. And best of all, it starts working in seconds. That's why they have a 400% customer loyalty above other skincare brands. And now you can get Genucel XV, the collagen builder moisturizer with vitamin C and hyaluronic acid in a pure natural base for stunning results day after day. So Gen 90 and XV are on special now at Genucel.com and included in their bestseller package, Best Value in Skincare Anywhere. So before you go overseas to get harsh products for thousands of dollars, try Gen 90 first. Now that's actually something, it's funny because Americans think that European skincare is all the rage, right? Like they sure know something in Europe that must be, if you can market something as European skincare, Americans love it. Now, having lived in Europe for 5 years, they don't know anything we don't know. It's the same. So you might as well get something that is not made overseas. It's actually made for you. You don't have to look that far. So right now, go to Genucel.com/redacted. One more time, that's Genucel.com/redacted. Get a free beauty box and a deep firming serum while supplies last, plus free shipping on all orders. One more time, that's Genucel.com/redacted. YouTube.com/redacted.
Well, this is the day that we've been waiting for, which is the day when the Freedom Convoy truckers in Canada sue Justin Trudeau. And that day has finally arrived. For more details on this, what it entails, how many truckers are involved, what are they hoping for, and is the Trudeau government running and hiding? We want to ask David Clayton, who's a Canadian journalist who writes at the Post Millennial, about all of this. He's got a great YouTube channel as well, Creighton's Right. David, I'm surprised it actually took this long, but it seems like you're getting a group of these convoy truckers on the same page, almost like in a class action lawsuit kind of a way, to go after Trudeau. Can you break this down for us?
Yeah, it's quite interesting because it's not exactly a class action lawsuit. It's 20 individuals who are the chief and the key participants in the Freedom Convoy who are suing individually, but they're sort of being grouped because this is the same sort of lawsuit. And they're suing the Trudeau government. They're suing Justin Trudeau. They're suing the Liberal government and the various interlocutors in that government that participated in the invocation of the Emergencies Act, including freezing their bank accounts. So this is Tamara Leach, who is most well known, along with Chris Barber, who are on trial themselves right now. And I've been covering that trial here in Ottawa for mischief and other very minor offenses. So they've been so wrapped up in their own legal problems. And the other 18 people on this list, some of whom are also entangled in minor mischief charges as well. And I think the reason this has taken so long is that they have been overwhelmed by the bureaucracy and the legal situation that they are personally in, that they haven't had a chance to finally strike back. And you have to remember as well that the Freedom Convoy participants and even the donors to the Freedom Convoy protest are subject right now to a $300 million lawsuit that is being brought against them by so-called concerned citizens in downtown Ottawa, largely people who are griping about the fact that they heard a bit of honking from time to time. There was a little bit of diesel exhaust in the air, and supposedly it interrupted their lives. They don't mention the fact that the pandemic lockdowns had Ottawa and the capital locked down for months, but they want to blame the Freedom Convoy. So while this is coming against them, thank God they've said, look, we are taking Trudeau to court for $2 million apiece. This is not $2 million for the whole 20. I mean, that would be ridiculous. $2 million apiece. And they're going after the Trudeau government, and they're saying, you owe us for what you've done to our lives, not just during COVID, but in the aftermath, because of all of the expenses incurred with the legal problems you've given us, and you've destroyed our lives in many ways. A lot of these people have had their lives destroyed because of COVID and their refusal to bend to Trudeau's will.
Now, I know you're not a lawyer. Maybe you are. Maybe that's a secret hobby of yours that I don't know about. But, you know, during the litigation process, of course, what we look forward to, of course, is discovery, right? We want to see if this moves forward and these are not dismissed, because a judge could easily come in and just with one fell swoop dismiss all of these lawsuits and say, sorry, we're not moving these forward at all. First of all, I'll ask you this. Do you anticipate that would happen, that these would be dismissed? And the second sort of follow-up question would be, is that then if this moves forward, we go through a discovery process. And what do, Tamara Leach and Chris Barber and others hope to maybe discover during that discovery process? Emails, communications, a coordinated conspiracy to work with the press, to work with other government agencies, to go after these Freedom Convoy truckers. To me, that would be the most interesting part of this entire litigation.
I do expect this to go forward. I do not expect this to be quashed by a judge, and I'll tell you why. Because a federal court just found Justin Trudeau's invocation of the Emergencies Act to be unconstitutional, unjustified, and unreasonable. Couldn't ask for a better declaration for this group to say, hey, you owe us. This was illegal. It was an illegal act.
Right.
Now, it's not something illegal as in terms of Justin Trudeau getting charged and going to jail over it, but it was unconstitutional and it violated the law. So I think that is certainly an arrow in the quiver of the Freedom Convoy participants. There's no way any judge is going to say, hey, nothing going on here, because the federal court has already said this was completely unreasonable. Now, what the Freedom Convoy people and what concerned citizens, including myself as a journalist, what I want to know is, why did Trudeau invoke the Emergencies Act at all, when the only real issue of national security was the one at the border in Ontario and Alberta? And that was already resolved by February 14th, 2022, when Trudeau invoked the Emergencies Act. That so-called crisis was already over. So the whole thing was aimed at the Ottawa demonstration, which time and time again we have shown was peaceful and without any violence and the complete absence of any armaments or weapons on the site. So why did he invoke it? Well, we know now he invoked it based on false intelligence from a non-governmental organization, Anti-Hate Canada, that was in fact funded by the federal government. This is how corrupt and how incredibly distorted this is. Trudeau based his analysis. The federal government based their analysis, the Justice Minister, the Deputy Prime Minister, Chrystia Freeland, who froze bank accounts. It was all based on fake news. It was all based on misinformation coming from a website that was in fact funded by the Liberal government. And this was all phony information. They said that the Freedom Convoy was somehow based on white supremacy, on white nationalism, on far-right politics, that it even had a militia under its command, which is all nonsense. None of this was true. And Trudeau then used this false information, which he knew was funded by his own government, and he shared that information with the Five Eyes, this intelligence group that includes the United States, the United Kingdom, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada. They shared this information amongst themselves. This is scandalous, and this is what we hope any discovery will reveal. How Trudeau completely invented the evidence to invoke the Emergencies Act, how he lied about it, not just about these people being misogynist and racist and somehow Nazis because he doesn't agree with them, but how he fudged all of the intelligence. And he knew he fudged the intelligence. He knew he lied. And this was all based on Trudeau's crazy hypothesis.
I would love to see this come out in Discovery. I think these are the things that, we learned about the Russiagate hoax, right? Using a fake Steele dossier to then push that forward. Then January 6th, and of course that hoax, pushing that forward as an insurrection to go in and imprison people for many years, or go after all these January 6 individuals, and using the sort of same game plan. It's like they're operating from the same playbook here to go after these individuals. I hope that these all are able to move forward. I mean, 20 of these or more. I mean, you think Justin Trudeau is going to have to show up to court to answer for these, or he'll send one of his lackeys to try to answer for one of these, if it even makes it that far, or where they just, settle out of court and put some sort of a gag order, some sort of a non-disclosure agreement that they're not able to talk about it. So we might never see this discovery process and what the documents behind all of this. So I still have a lot of questions. I guess we'll see. When do we expect to hear a hearing date on any of this, where this moves forward, David?
Imagine within the next 3 months, because these things grind very slowly. It's worth noting, though, that Justin Trudeau actually showed up at the Emergencies Act inquiry, which was about a year and a half ago now, last November. And he made an absolute fool of himself at that investigation. He decided he was going to go there and set the record straight. And of course, he was so ill prepared. And all he did was recycle the same talking points, the same lies, read from the same script. And the Freedom Convoy lawyer, who has really become a friend of mine since that incident, Eva Chipiuk, she nailed Trudeau to the wall by saying, why did you call these people you disagreed with misogynist and racist? And Trudeau lied. I never called anybody names. And of course, we've got the video evidence.
We have the video, yeah.
And then she said to him, one of the most telling remarks of the whole inquiry, when did you start to fear Canadians, Mr. Trudeau? And he was speechless. He could not respond to that.
Yeah. Well, like in the United States, Americans are the greatest terrorist threat now to the Biden administration. If you're a MAGA supporter, you're the biggest threat to the United States right now. Not foreign terrorists, it's the United States. It's Canadians, which are the biggest threat to your democracy up there. David Creighton, great to see you. We'll be following this closely over the next few months. I can't wait to see how this unfolds, how far in the court system this gets, or if it's squashed in any way. We'll be watching it. David, great to see you.
Thank you so much, Clay.
So thanks so much to David for joining us here on the show. Canada is crazy right now. I mean, you literally have Trudeau yesterday warning us all that, the world is moving towards authoritarianism and dictatorships. It's like, does he not look himself in the mirror and realize what he's actually saying? Seizing emergency powers illegally to clamp down on truckers? It's unbelievable. Anyway, the hypocrisy of Justin Trudeau. We want to mention we have a community here. We have a VIP community. I'd love for you guys to join us. It's our exclusive Plus Club. Redacted Plus is what it's called. All you need to do to support independent journalism is come over to redacted.inc. It's not .com, it's .inc. And join us. Again, the show is totally free. We work on it every day for you for free on Rumble, on YouTube, on X, so you can have this show for free. But if you'd like to support us a little bit more, for the price of a cup of coffee once a month, you can do that. Again, we are independent. We're not funded by Pfizer or anything. We need your help to stay on the air and do what we do here. So you can come over. You get exclusive content, exclusive interviews, content that you won't see here on the channel, but in addition to live streams, and you get to see interviews and other content before anyone else. We release it to our community first, our redacted conversations, and our other exclusive content. Again, if you want to stay connected with our audience, with other members of the community, it's a great place to come. So come over to redacted.inc and join our Plus Club. And thank you guys so much for joining us here on this Tuesday. We'll be back here tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern Time live. So until then, everyone, have a great night.